Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing Sony's Gamescom conference, and it was a whirlwind event. It was about 90 minutes, but we learned quite a hell of a lot, and we're going to be discussing it, well, quite in depth in this video. So we're going to be doing like a roundup of my thoughts and opinions over the entire event, and so on and so forth. So we're going to be discussing, first of all, parts that aren't really console specific. We're just going to be talking about the presentation, the message, and so forth. And first thing I'd like to say is that the connection quality, at least for me, was pretty abysmal, and not just for me actually. For a couple of people, the service quality was pretty bad. Several drops during key areas actually, and sometimes you're waiting for like 20 seconds for buffering, so that was kind of really annoying. And it wasn't just me that was having the issue. I was watching some live chats, and several people were having that issue, as well as a couple of friends who were watching the conference as well. So that was a bit annoying. Regardless, that's not really Sony's fault, however. So, what did I think of the overall conference? Well, of course, they put on the normal show extravaganza that you'd expect. There were a couple of things that really did irritate me. One, on specific trailers and so forth, they kept zooming out of the trailer and showing the whole, conference hall rather than the trailer itself. That was kind of annoying because it seemed to be doing it at the worst possible moments in terms of the action as well. In other words, parts where you actually wanted to see the bloody trailer. I understand for certain parts when they were showing off, for example, the crossplay, for example, with the Vita on Black Flag. That was completely understandable, and I think that was a good idea they did that. But overall, when they were showing, trailers and actual gameplay, it was really annoying for them to keep doing that. I don't honestly understand what the heck they were thinking of. So, what about the rest of the event? Well, we did learn quite a substantial amount. Mostly that Sony focusing really heavily on for gamers, by gamers. In other words, saying that, you know what, we're not just a bunch of people who put together stuff, we are a bunch of gamers who are writing software for other gamers. In other words, we want to enjoy the software and so on. And they were very proud to show off a couple of partnerships as well, specifically Ubisoft in particular, as well as the indie thing. So I'm going to speak about the indie side first before we really start to hammer into the rest of it. So, indie support, of course, was really, really strong. You'll notice that they were speaking quite a lot about console exclusives, and obviously a lot of indie ports are, well, a lot of indie titles are going to be ports from PC games, and I don't really have problems with that per se, and it's obvious that indies don't really have a bad word to say about Sony. They seem really positive and upbeat. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. And of course, there are a relatively decent smattering of games available from various different ranges, of course, including titles from developers of Dear Esther and so on. The only problem I have is some of the trailers were fairly short and didn't really give enough information of exactly what the game was. I understand that obviously certain titles are in various stages of pre-production and so on, but even so, I wish that we saw a little bit more gameplay on them regardless. One of the real things that we noticed is the price reduction, specifically on the Vita and the PlayStation 3. Now, the Vita is going to be going all the way down to $199.99. That would be euros and dollars. And I can kind of understand their plan. They really were trying to push the Vita. They were trying to indicate that the Vita is a very cool piece of kit. And the example that they gave is, let's say someone is in the, you're gaming in the living room, your partner or ex, person X comes into the room, and then they say, you know what, I want to watch some rubbish on TV. Those are Sony's words, and you want to continue playing whatever game it is. Well, then you can just go into another room or whatever and play on the Vita. Of course, this is all on a local network, and also stress that pretty much all of the games, not every single title, but quite a few titles, was going to be cross-play. So, what did I think of that? Well, they really were pushing the Vita. They even catered and stated that, one of the things that I like, and the getting developers, and they're saying that one of the things that developers liked was the fact it's a dedicated device. And this actually ties into what John Carmack has said previously, that one of the problems with cell phones and tablets and so on is because the device is doing so many different things, and the operating system itself is, let's go with crap when it comes to allocating resources for certain applications. It just doesn't really go well, and so a dedicated device was really much better, and they of course really noted on the Vita's screen and precision controls and so on. I don't really have a problem with that. I don't actually have anything against a Vita. I don't own a Vita. I don't necessarily know if I'll buy a Vita for the purposes of this conference or whatever. It did look pretty cool. There were a couple of nice looking titles. One, for example, where you get to actually manage an unsigned band, a real life unsigned band, and that's pretty cool. And it did have some nice innovative features. I did notice, of course, that they were also pushing the indie side of things, and they kept saying that, you know what, the reason that we want indies is to basically give us a kick up the ass, to show us innovation, and to really, for us to focus on that innovation and, you know, brand new ideas, and they believe it's going to be a new renaissance in gaming. And this is a problem, of course, with current production costs. Most indies don't really want to release a game on, say, the PlayStation 3. It's not that they don't want to, it's just it's very tricky to, because of the crappy tool chains that they've been working with. Although they're getting a lot better, to be fair. Nowhere near as... not as much of a hindrance as they used to be anyway. But, of course, things are going better. They also mentioned, of course, that there are titles from Santa Monica Studios, Naughty Dog, and so on being worked on for the PlayStation 4, but they didn't mention anything else about that, which is a bit of a shame, but not really a surprise either way. We're also going to be seeing a price drop for the PlayStation 3 for the 12GB models as well, obviously to try and get people's foot in the door. And similarly, certain titles, for example, Ghosts, Call of Duty Ghosts, and Assassin's Creed Black Flag, if you were to say buy the PlayStation 3 titles and then later on pick it up on the PlayStation 4 for a limited period, you have like a set period to actually buy the title again on the PlayStation 4 as a digital copy, but at a drastically reduced price. They didn't give any indication of what greatly reduced is. Greatly reduced means many things to many different people. Some would call greatly reduced 25%, others would consider it to be 80%. So I guess we'll have to figure out our own interpretations of that. So the conference started as it means to go on, really, and they set a pretty high note, and there was a couple of shots there towards Microsoft, and one of the comments they did make, well, there was a couple of them, but basically their message was, you know what, we've remained focused, we've remained on the games, we've remained on the fact that we want the games to be the primary focus of our platform, and unlike our competitors, this hasn't been the case, and obviously they're shooting that at Microsoft, not really Nintendo. You can't really focus that on Nintendo at all, so obviously they were slapping Microsoft there, which is kind of a dirty blow, but hey, all's fair in love and console wars, right? Similarly, you also noticed that there was a lot of crossover there with movie titles, including with Ubisoft in regards to Watch Dogs, and this is, I think, going to be the things to come. Obviously, games to movies are pretty synonymous with crap. That's not to say all games to movies are bad. It's, you know, it's kind of hit or miss, but a lot of the time it's more miss than hit, to be honest with you. So, what are my thoughts overall of the PlayStation 3 stuff? Well, honestly, the PlayStation 3 stuff was okay. I wasn't super impressed with it, but maybe that's just my personal opinion. I used to be a huge fan of Gran Turismo back in the day, but for some reason, I've just somewhat just gone out of the whole series, and to be honest, that was the most impressive title for me. Obviously, a lot of the titles that I'm personally interested in are coming on the PlayStation 4 anyway. But obviously they are trying to still support the PlayStation 3 platform, and considering just how old it is now, to show off so many exclusives and to show that not only indies but, you know, full-blown studios are still releasing titles, it's pretty impressive. I mean, one argument many people have levied is, well, why did they release the Gran Turismo on the PlayStation 3? Why not make it a PS4 game? And most people assume, or that's going to be sales orientated. But who the heck knows? So the PlayStation 4 announcement kind of breezed by, and there were, of course, many things mentioned, including the release date, including, of course, a reconfirmation of the price, including the amount of countries it's going to be released in, and, of course, another look at some certain footage, and a few other bits and pieces as well. So what did I think? Well, I have a couple of issues, actually, with the lineup. I think perhaps some of it was to do with the fact that maybe we expected some more footage. I was expecting some more footage as well, anyway. And I was really hoping for a title from Santa Monica Studios, from Naughty Dog, or something similar to be shown off, like another Last of Us type of game. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. For me, the real star of the show is going to be Infamous Second Son, but obviously we've got to wait a little bit past launch for that, which is a shame. To be honest with you, as much as I'm still very happy and very interested in the PlayStation 4, considering the E3 conference, I didn't think the Gamescom conference was quite as exciting as what I hoped for. I was watching the live chat and people were pretty pissed, actually, that there's going to be such a disparity between the UK launch date, for example, the European launch date and the American launch date. However, one thing that I will say is they have a significant advantage over Microsoft in terms of the amount of regions they are aiming for, 32 countries, but still, a 2-week launch window disparity, I'm not really a fan of that. If I had to take a guesstimate of why this is, it's most likely, of course, because Europe has so many different languages and regions. I just wish they'd have pushed more for the worldwide launch, but there you have it. Grand Theft Auto and Watch Dogs, of course, have some exclusive. They are going to be releasing an exclusive PlayStation 3 hardware pack with GTA 5, which is quite nice, including some free DLC bits and bobs, and Watch Dogs gets about 60 minutes of extra gameplay, apparently. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I don't really ever like exclusive gameplay for a particular title. I don't have a problem with it per se. Regardless, Killzone Shadowfall also looked pretty damn nice on the PlayStation 4, and I have to say, graphically it was definitely the most impressive, in my personal opinion anyway, title on the system. It's obvious that Guerrilla Games are going to be really the yardstick for many developers to match for quite a while. I think Naughty Dog and Guerrilla, just for example, and of course Santa Monica are obviously going to be huge designers of the games. I also like the fact that for PlayStation 4 new owners, in other words, if you just pick up a PlayStation 4, you get a couple of weeks basically for PlayStation Plus, which means that you basically get full access to the instant collections of the games. You get to try out online gaming and so on. That wasn't too bad, actually. It was actually a really good idea. We would like to have seen it to be a month, but hey, even so, 2 weeks, well, about 2 weeks anyway, is a quite nice period for people to check out the games and to get a real good understanding of what the service is like. They did get a huge round of applause when Borderlands 2 was announced for the Vita as well, might I add. I actually forgot to mention that earlier. So, overall, I'm not unhappy with the conference. I felt that it did pretty well. However, at the same time, I felt that Sony didn't really feel that they wanted to do anything too risky. They felt pretty safe, pretty content, and pretty much at the point where they could just take the odd shot at Microsoft. They definitely did. There were a couple. The one I already mentioned in terms of the turnabout for the games and the DRM, and the other one was that they even mentioned that, we're not making you pay for certain services, for example, for access of movies and so on and so on. They were really keen to push that, we're going to make as much stuff free as possible. They're also very keen to push the value of PlayStation Plus. I actually have no real issue with them charging for PlayStation Plus. I actually think it's fairly fair, considering the amount of goodies that you're actually able to get. And it's a pretty good value for money. In theory, you're basically getting, a couple of games a month, even if you were to just play one of the games monthly. It's still a very good deal, financially speaking. It's like, what, €4 or something like that works out to be. So it's a pretty damn good price point. Similarly, there was an absolute massive round of applause when Shadow of the Beast, a reboot, is announced for the PlayStation 4. I have a very similar complaint to a couple of other titles. The trailer looked very interesting, it just didn't show enough, and I understand that sometimes they have to rush the trailer out and so on, but sometimes it's actually more frustrating to just see like a little tiny bit of footage. As it was, it didn't look bad. I have to say that I wasn't amazed graphically by it. A lot of this stuff is really early in production, so you can't really take it as this is how it is going to be when it is finished. The Chinese room, meanwhile, announced everybody has gone to the Rapture. I'm sorry, for some reason I've lost the ability to speak English. I have to say that did look pretty damn impressive, and the basic premise from what we understand from the trailer is that the end of the world has already happened. And so whatever events have transpired, we have absolutely no idea. The trailer was pretty damn vague, as you'd expect. You're basically playing after the end of the world, which is quite an interesting experience. There was a lot of text on screen, a lot of command prompt type of stuff, and it looked quite interesting. I have a slight rage on this, actually. There's a couple of pieces of text that were pretty damn difficult to read because for whatever reason or another, they kept zooming the screen out to show the whole theatre rather than actually focusing on the trailer itself. And this is one of the things that I didn't really like about what they were doing in terms of showing off. I have no idea. Well, they kept showing the audience. It wasn't as though the audience were clapping at the time. The audience were just sitting there watching the trailer. So all we got was basically looking at a zoomed out version of the screen with loads of other people watching it. It was basically like voyeurism. Or to put it another way, it was like, I don't know, going to see a blockbuster movie, but rather than actually going to see the movie, instead you're kind of all the way at the back looking at other people watching the movie so that you can watch them watching the movie, and that's part of the movie. I really didn't understand that. I understand that they were trying to make it epic and everything like that, but you know what, for trailers, pro tip guys, please don't do that. We want to watch the trailer, not watch loads of people watching the trailer. So overall, my thoughts of the conference were pretty reasonable. I didn't think it was as exciting maybe as what I was expecting. I was expecting a little bit more if I'm honest, but I think it's only because they had such a ridiculously high standard at E3. And honestly speaking, it was very difficult for them to keep that up. They did have Mark Cerny there, of course, making very small comments technologically, but he didn't really go into any in-depth analysis or whatever. He just pointed out that, the system is very easy, so it's basically recycled verbatim, and I don't have a problem with that per se. I just wish that there was a little bit more there to said in regards to the console. They did show off the UI, and it looked fairly nice actually. It didn't look bad. And of course, they did eventually now tell us the release date, which is going to be for North America, the 15th of November, for Europe, the 29th of November. So at least we finally know. There was so much confusion of actually when the system is going to be released. To be honest, I was pretty surprised. I was actually more surprised that it was November. I was pretty certain it was going to be sometime late October, because that would give them a decent head start over Microsoft, but I suppose it was just that they felt that they needed that extra little bit of time to get enough systems available for launch. He was also very happy to point out that there was 1 million pre-orders already worldwide. That's a substantial amount of consoles. Just how many of those actually get sold and so on, of course, is very difficult to know. He also pointed out that the PlayStation 3 is doing very well in Europe, much better than apparently the Xbox 360. One thing that they did point out several times over, it's the most powerful gaming console. They emphasised the word console there. Obviously, you can't compare it to, say, a PC, but they did point out was the best, the best console, and it was 10 times more powerful than the current generation. I think overall the conference was pretty good. There were some decent trailers that were shown. I wasn't that taken with Watch Dogs. The trailer was okay. It's actually kind of weird because I'm really looking forward to the game, but maybe it was just that particular trailer or whatever. It just didn't look that particularly interesting, at least to me. Sony were very keen to show their partnership with Ubisoft as well and show just how solid that is. So, to summarise my thoughts on the conference, nothing really new. There was a couple of new games shown off, but I think overall the conference was somewhat muted. I was expecting it to be a little bit more extravagant. There was a couple of odd choices, at least in my personal opinion. It was actually kind of cool when they were showing off before the conference started. The music they had was quite interesting. It was a very old school kind of music, and it's pretty interesting actually, kind of like BioShock actually. I'm talking about BioShock 1, Rapture. So that was quite nice. But overall, there were a couple of very interesting decisions I felt. I didn't think the trailers really were super amazing. I know trailers are very tricky things and extremely subjective, but I wasn't super excited about many of the trailers there. It's kind of weird because I'm really excited about the games, but the trailers themselves just really didn't do it for me. I think it's because a lot of the gameplay was very similar to what has been shown before, and there wasn't really that many new details revealed for the games, apart from maybe the odd thing if it's exclusive to, say, the PlayStation. I didn't really like the camera work, and I know that sounds being very petty indeed, but I think stuff like that is really important. Like, for me personally, I think it was really annoying with the trailer, because every time you started to really get into the trailer, it'd switch back out, and so you'd have to, look at it on these tiny little screens, well, what appear to be tiny little screens when you're looking at it from the, from the audience's perspective. And I don't really understand why they chosen to do that at all. But regardless, there were a lot of nice little touches throughout the conference, a lot of nice looking games, a very great focus, of course, on indies. I'm really impressed with some of the technology that they were showing off. It didn't really feel, personally anyway, that it was anything particularly new that they were demonstrating. The odd game here and there that did look quite nice, but for anyone that was expecting a huge reveal, anyone that was expecting something like a Naughty Dog game, anyone was expecting like another God of War or whatever reveal, we were a little bit disappointed. The trailers that were shown were okay, but at least in my personal opinion, nothing amazing. So overall, what are my thoughts? Well, I'm certainly going to be keeping my PlayStation 4 pre-order, and despite the fact that I've been a bit critical of this conference, I know it sounds very pernickety, some of the stuff that I've been saying, but the thing of it is, they had such a good first impressions at E3. The conference was absolutely amazing. The initial reveal, for example, was really impressive, and all of this stuff, together, really helps solidify the PlayStation brand. But in my personal opinion, Gamescom for Sony was definitely the weakest of their conferences. There was some nice footage shown of Infamous Second Son and a couple of other trailers besides. There were some exciting reveals regarding the Vita, for example. Some great deals and so on showing off, but I wasn't really that amazed by a lot of the trailers. I felt that they just didn't really show anything that was majorly exciting, at least to my mind. I was also keeping an eye on a couple of live chat streams as well, because I had numerous websites open. I was periodically checking, and many people seemed to, share my opinions. In fact, a couple of people seemed really, really angry with the release date being delayed in Europe. And similarly, I actually saw quite a few people raging that Naughty Dog or similar studios weren't unveiled. And I mean, I was really surprised at the aggression levels that some people were showing off. That some people were actually pretty damn pissed. I mean, comments like "fucking Sony" a couple of times appeared on screen, and I was really surprised at that. I actually didn't think that people were going to get so annoyed at the release date or anything else. I actually thought that there wasn't anything particularly rage-worthy in the conference. I am a bit annoyed at the release date delay. I have to confess, I am a bit annoyed by that. I would say I was somewhat perturbed, but overall, I wasn't really annoyed with the conference. I felt that it was fairly solid. I didn't think that Sony did anything particularly wrong. I just didn't think it was their strongest conference either. So I was really surprised that some people were taking it so bloody aggressively. I mean, but then again, it is the internet, and you can't have an opinion on the internet without someone swearing lots at you. It's a well-known fact, unfortunately. So yeah, my personal opinion is it was a reasonable conference from Sony. They did show that they were still supporting their old platforms. They really are keen to push the Vita. The PlayStation 4, I don't really feel like I learned that much more from the conference. Aside from the release date, a couple of new games, and various other bits and bobs. But it was quite reassuring, at least from my mind, to see that indie developers as well as first-party developers were all talking about just how easy it is to create worlds. But once again, a lot of this is just stuff that's already been said before, and I think that's the problem with the conference. It was a conference that, at least to my mind, was one of those conferences that you can just tell that they're using it to reassert their message, reassert their stance, rather than trying to add lots of new stuff and confuse the message. They instead backed all of the stuff they'd already set up and just somewhat filled in the cracks, and I think that's why, at least to me, it felt somewhat less exciting. Not bad, not a bad conference, just not as exciting as, say, the E3 conference when we were learning all this cool stuff regarding the PlayStation 4. For example, its stance on DRM and everything like that. And so when they were saying that stuff at E3, it was like you could just feel that there was so much impact in the room, and that's not to say that the applause this time was bad or anything like that. It just felt somewhat mute compared to E3, and I think it's simply because the announcements, they were just so difficult to trump what's gone before. So once again, just to reiterate, I'm happy with the conference. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't think it was exciting as the previous conferences that Sony have had in the past regarding the PlayStation 4, and I think that we're going to be having a very good time of it for gaming regardless. Anyway, this has been a fairly itsy-bitsy video. It's been kind of a rant/opinions video, of course. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.